Welcome to the Transform Your Relationship podcast, where we'll go beyond the typical relationship advice. I'm your host, Manisha Terry, somatic healing practitioner and mentor. Each week, I'll share personal insights, client success stories, and how my holistic trauma-informed approach can help you transform your relationship from the inside out. You'll learn ways to recognize and prioritize your needs, get to the root of what's upsetting you, and courageously ask for what you want so you can confidently co-create the relationship you desire. You'll also hear from guest experts who will be invited to share their unique approaches to transformation, and at the end of each episode, you'll receive one tangible practice you can implement right away to transform your relationship. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Transform Your Relationship podcast. I'm your host, Manisha. Just want to take a moment to thank you for being here and thank you for listening. We are hitting nearly a year of this podcast. That will be in early June, and this is going to be released about mid-May. So I can't believe how fast this year has gone, and I've just really loved recording this, sharing my thoughts, bringing on guests, and really want to say how grateful I am to you all for listening. It's a beautiful spring day here as I'm recording this, and I have been able to get outside pretty much every day to go on either a walk or a run, and it's been so grounding, and especially as we're entering Taurus season. For those of you who have listened, you know that I am obsessed with astrology in all the best ways, which we'll get into later in this episode, actually. But it's just been so nice to have this lovely weather and truly enjoy it. And again, thank you so much for being here. And today I am really excited because I get to share a conversation with you that I had with a client who was gracious enough to come onto the podcast to share her experience of our work together for the last several years. I really find that this work of personal development, healing from past experiences, and just changing deeply ingrained patterns really shifts the trajectory of our lives and our relationships. And while we're doing it, it can feel slow, it can feel painful at times, but it's so worth it, and I hope that you'll be able to see that today when we dive in with my guest. Because this work is so deep and personal, we're not going to be sharing names today to maintain that privacy. And just to offer you a little bit of context, I have been working with this client for just over 5 years. And while, of course, I will work with clients for much shorter periods of time if we are focused on a particular specific issue within their relationship, my work with this client has just evolved over years. When she came to me initially, it really was focused on the challenges within her marriage, but it's evolved to so much more beyond that because she's in a completely different place in her relationship, which is going to be really great to share with you all. And what I'd like to highlight about that is just to say that sometimes we don't realize how much time and mental energy a relationship is actually taking from us. And while I'm not here at all to idealize relationships, because I know that certainly things come up and things happen and life is challenging, when that part of your life feels good and when you've learned how to navigate within the hard times, you have so much more energy to explore other parts of your life, to understand more what brings you joy, how you can contribute to the world, what will allow you to live in a more purposeful way. And what I really see over time when I work with clients is that sometimes the relationship part is just really taking up so much bandwidth that they don't really have a ton of space to explore these other parts of themselves, which really just allow them to become and feel like a much more whole person, a person with great relationships, and also somebody who is, aligned with their purpose and doing what they want to be doing in the world. So on that note, we will get into our conversation. I am so happy to welcome my client onto the show and share her story with you. As I mentioned, she is a client that I've been working with since the spring of 2019, so I can hardly believe that it's been 5 years. And so I just want to thank you so much for being here and give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, and then we will dive into some questions together.
That sounds so great, Manisha. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm so excited to speak with you and to share this with your audience.
Amazing. So, do you want to share anything about yourself to start with, or should we just kind of dive right in and you can share as we go along?
Let's dive right in because I think
Okay.
we're going to get into some good, deep conversation.
Okay, perfect. Great. So, if you can recall back to the spring of 2019, I know that can be hard sometimes when we're in such a different place in our lives, but if you could recall back and share a little bit about what were you struggling with that made you seek out support? What were you going through? Like, what was kind of going on in your life and in your mind, like as you were seeking out some help?
Yes, certainly. So, to be honest, the spring of 2019 seems like worlds ago. That spring was certainly a season of change for me. It was my first year of marriage. I was preparing to move overseas to Italy for a 4-year assignment. And given how close I am with my parents, that made that choice very difficult. Um, I
Mm,
was a mom for the first time ever. And with everything that comes with it, the physical changes and all of the adjustments to even just having time for myself. So, in many ways, I was just really struggling to feel grounded. I I had a reliable baseline through all of that chaos. And for example, personally and in my relationships, I didn't hold boundaries well. I wasn't feeling like I had enough presence in my relationship with my
mhm,
husband. I
mhm,
deferred a lot. I didn't speak
mm,
my opinion as much as I think that I should have. And just generally, I'm a sensitive person. So I didn't know how to use my emotional side. Um,
mm,
I didn't know how to use my emotional side to inform me instead of overwhelm me. And I didn't understand my triggers and how to learn from that instead of just react to them. And then, just overall, I knew that I wanted a neutral support person in my life that I could connect with deeply. And then I found you.
mm. Wow, yeah. So I mean the way you're talking about it now with the boundaries and like understanding the emotions and sort of using that emotional side, I know that we've had many conversations about that in terms of feeling maybe too emotional or not being able to really harness the power of that, which I think is so valuable. But when you were experiencing it, because it's like we have such different language later on after we've been doing different kinds of personal development work, like would you say at that time that you weren't setting boundaries, or did you realize that that was happening, or what was the state of your day-to-day experience?
I think initially I wasn't really aware of how important boundaries are.
Okay.
So I was just kind of coming up against that challenge when in my relationships, I felt like I wasn't fully present, that I
Mm,
wasn't holding my space, and that I was really giving away parts of me to other people. And it wasn't until I really kind of got comfortable with asserting myself and my opinions and my feelings that I realized that I have I have other choices that I can make that
mhm.
will make me really happy and proud about how I show up in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a palpable feeling, I think, when that shifts and you are able to share, like from your heart, from an authentic place.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that it feels like control because that's a very sort of
Mm,
authoritative word. I think in the situations where I found myself with really weak boundaries, I felt a little bit lost and I felt misguided and I felt
mm,
like I was flailing. But now I would say that I have agency
mm,
over how it's just a more conscious way of behaving and I feel so much more aligned. I can't tell you
mhm.
how I can't even put it into words, but there's just a feeling of being at peace. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's funny that you mentioned the word control because I don't love that word either. I feel like it can be constricting, but so sometimes when I use it, I say, well, control in a good way, like in quotes, because I do think that sometimes that part of anxiety or not being able to speak up can feel a little bit like, oh my gosh, I just feel all over the place. And sort of the instinct is perhaps to want to control because we usually feel a little bit safer, but I think with our emotions, it's so much about like letting them move through and discerning and picking out the ones that are actually giving us information so we can do something with them. So I love the word agency and the way
Yeah,
you're, yeah.
that's been so important in my work with you, Manisha. I when I was back in that phase of my life, I didn't really have tools to use or the awareness of really what was going on and the chaos of my mind. And so my initial thought was, I have to control this. Like, I have to control this and I have to change this about myself. But I
Mhm.
didn't even know where to start. So
Yeah.
it was really about settling in and understanding really what's going through my mind and my heart and how my body's responding to that. That's
Mhm.
really led me to be able to be comfortable ultimately.
Yeah, that's so well said. The heart, the mind, and the body, and how do we find like the alignment within that to be able to make those choices? And I'm curious, what were you like? What did you tried previous to our work? Because, and we'll get into this as we continue, but my approach is more of a somatic approach, and which is like different than talking through. And so I'd love for you to just share, like, maybe what had you tried, and and where had it gotten you, and then how and why you were open to maybe trying something a little different.
So I had started meditating on my own and I read a lot of self-help content and I had gathered a lot of ideas about the person that I wanted to evolve into, but I didn't know
Mm,
how to embody that. I would sit down and meditate and I wasn't really in my body. I was really just in my head and it was very distracting. It was really hard for me to be disciplined in that way. And in terms of sort of therapy, I had not ever done formal therapy with anyone. I had done like a marriage counseling or marriage therapy with my husband, but that was essentially talk therapy. And it felt superficial to me given that I'm a sensitive person. And I knew that I had to work through my emotions and understand myself better, but I did not know how to do that. I didn't have a roadmap or a place to start, and I was just overthinking myself and my challenges in my mind constantly. And then I think it was so I actually learned about you, Manisha, from a good friend, a best friend of mine, her sister who had worked with you, and she's somebody that I trust. And I remember I looked you up and your picture, showed warmth and I looked into your background and it was substantial, but I had no idea what somatic healing was.
mm,
Um,
mhm,
and I remember on our first call, you kind of settled me into a guided meditation. And after I got off the phone with you, something felt different. I felt at ease just by that first conversation, which, I'm very open-minded and I can easily access my emotional side, but to be doing a guided meditation with someone that I didn't know was so surprising. And I mean, I knew right away that if I was going to make a difference, that this is the type of work, even though I didn't understand the scope of it or really much about it, it felt right in my gut,
mm.
and I knew that this was the right path forward for me.
Yeah, I love that for so many reasons. One, I mean, someone that you trusted obviously guided you in this direction. And then in terms of our own conversation, like you came really open to it. And I love that you were able to just feel this palpable shift. And I have a question. I'm curious about what you said about the feeling of like I'm sensitive, and so I felt like this way of working with the maybe the couples counseling like felt a little superficial. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so in a situation like for example with the marriage counseling, it was myself, my husband in a room with a therapist. And I really what kind sort of the process that I would go through in sharing my thoughts and feelings is that I would have a conviction towards a way that I felt, but the way that I communicated it and put words to my emotions was almost like a step removed from how I was really feeling. And I think I was trying to like over exercise my mind
Mm,
into interpreting my feelings. And the difference between that sort of talk therapy where I'm, trying to interpret and convey my emotions and feelings, and the work that we do together is that I get to understand what's going on with my emotions and my feelings, and I get to almost become friends with sort of feelings that don't feel good, or emotions that are challenging. So the result is that I really I really can get to a place of calm and peace and of understanding and acceptance. And by spending that additional, effort and energy and attention on really what's going on with me, um, I'm able to just speak in a way that's more aligned, where I'm not taxing my, the busy part of my mind to try to convey how I feel, because it just almost naturally arises.
That's so interesting. Different kinds of modalities work for different people. And I think that for people who are sensitive, and I say this often, I think a body-based approach can be super helpful because we do have that tendency to like overthink and maybe ruminate and get stuck in those cycles. So to be able to shift down or to receive help to shift down and to really feel like, what is this actually feeling like, and not in the sense of let me label my emotions, but actually like, what are some of the sensations and where is some of that, agitation, maybe that's showing up as a sensation. And I love how you said, like, I can become friends with it and, really get to know these parts. And then instead of, it sounded like, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you were saying before with, the maybe more formal sessions is like you're sort of creating this thought about, and you were speaking to like the thought in a more neutral or maybe like in a detached way versus with this method, you're really more embodied and connected. And whatever you're saying is really like a reflection of actually how you're feeling.
Absolutely. That is so true. And it's like kind of referencing back to what I mentioned before with, this connection between mind, heart, and body. Through our work together, I would say that it's almost like strengthening those, as if there was like, as if when you exercise, you strengthen a muscle. It's almost strengthening those bonds and that connection. And it's been such a beautiful progression, because a lot of times, when we are working together, you'll really help me to identify sort of the sensation in my body and where that might be located. And by practicing that, I've really gained more awareness around it. And a lot of times, if I sort of come across a similar emotion or a similar feeling, I'm already familiar with it.
Hmm.
And I guess it just creates a better relationship for me to get to understand myself. And so much has come from that.
I appreciate you sharing that and saying that because it's so sometimes intangible. Like, what are these practices really? How are they really gonna to help me in my everyday life to be able to do this where I'm dropping in and sensing my feelings or emotions? But what I hear you saying here is like when you come up against a similar thing in other parts of your life, like the tools that you've put into practice and put into place, that there's like almost like a little bit of a muscle memory or an emotional memory, and you're able to move yourself through that like on your own.
Yes, it's so true. And in the beginning, like I used that word control. I just wanted to control it so that I could change and be a
Mm,
better version of myself, but I also wanted it to go away. So the
yes.
idea in reality, by welcoming in those uncomfortable emotions and processing them, I mean, it was a total, it was kind of the opposite mental construct of what I expected to be the
Mm.
way to go about change.
Yeah, and if you recall, just in not so past session, a pretty recent session, we were talking about something, and what we were kind of getting to is like both things can be true. Like I think there was something you sort of you wanted it to go away, but you were sitting with it, and it was this whole thing of, oh, can we hold both of these things? Because yes, I mean, when we are struggling or we're experiencing something, and I've certainly had this too, where I'm like, I just want this to go away. Like, I don't really want to deal with this anymore, you know? But then there's this other part within me that feels like it's really important for this to be here. So then it's like you create this fight within yourself. And so I think so much about this practice is like, can I hold both of these things? Like this part of me that wants it to go away, but this other part of me that thinks is holding on to it for dear life. And like, can they sort of start to mesh together a little bit and create a little bit of internal harmony?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true.
And so, so you've already shared some things that just feel like, in the way you're showing up and the way you're speaking your mind and sharing your opinions and things that have shifted. But what are some other maybe more tangible things that you could share with people? Because again, sometimes they think, we talk about personal development or getting to know ourselves, and like it can almost feel like a luxury. Like, do I have time to like do this? Or is this the most important thing I should be doing? Or are there other things that I need to be spending my time on? And I know that just from our work together, doing this work has, expanded many other areas of your life. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what I would say is that I felt for a long time, I alluded to this briefly before, but I felt like a lot for a long time, I was giving away parts of myself to others. And just by virtue of being a mother and, giving time and sort of planning around my child's needs, or being a daughter and making sure my parents are taken care of, and, keeping in mind their expectations for me. And if I was living up to that, and then, wanting to be a good wife and a reliable partner, my world was kind of full of other people's needs and other people's expectations. And what I've noticed as more tangible results is that I've really kind of broken away from the mold of the expectations that I held for myself that were based on other people's opinions. I have a job now that's very non-traditional. I work in venture capital, and I was originally a school teacher, and then I worked for the government in very structured organizations. And now I work from home and I can plan my day by design. And part of that is making time for myself to do things that I know are important to me. So, in many ways, it's almost just been this beautiful coming into awareness about how I served others, like beyond my own capacity, whether it be time, attention, resources, etc. And slowly but surely, like with the reference to how my professional life has changed, I always wanted to have a professional career that would make my parents happy. And that's just one example of expectations that I held as really higher importance than what I really considered might be right for myself. So I think just sort of considering what's important to me on my own terms, and then starting to live that life that I truly envision for myself, while still taking care of others, but not at the expense of giving myself away, has been really profound.
Yeah, I think for so many women, like I'm sure they could relate to just that feeling of constantly putting others in front, especially in these different roles, right? Like of like wife and mother and daughter and making sure and just that giving ourselves away to these different relationships. And again, like even as I was saying before about the somatic work of holding both, like it can be both. Like you can be giving and loving and kind, and you can also be taking care of yourself. And there's just been like that part has gone missing somewhere in our cultural context. And of course, everyone has their own like personal upbringing and expectations and all of that stuff. But I think there's such a pressure to do that. And then I'm going to bring this into it because we talked about sharing a little bit of the astrology piece that I bring into the work too. And understanding like your chart and some of your nature and tendencies and things like that, I feel like has been a really big part of you understanding, okay, well, this is my tendency and this is just like a thing in my life that I sort of have to navigate and work with. But I can use this information to empower me to like make some shifts or make some changes. And so maybe you can share just a little bit about that and how that's impacted how
Yes,
you see yourself and our work together.
yes, I'm so excited to talk about this, mostly because the astrology piece was such a unexpected surprise. It was really a wild card for me, an area
Mhm.
I knew nothing about. But because you have exceptional talent in this area, and I don't know exactly how you do what you do, but it's just been really incredible to really witness, and I kind of really started to put belief behind this the first time that you read my chart, because so many of my personality traits and tendencies were so accurate. I remember that we even dedicated one of our sessions to overlaying my chart with my then 4-year-old
Yes.
sun chart, because
Yes.
I wanted to learn more about the inherent connections between our personalities. And that was a real gift and so special. It allowed me to view the parallels between our personalities and kind of learn ways that we are connected that I don't get to focus on in the
Hmm.
day to day. And all of that to say is that our time spent sort of in the context of astrology has given me a greater view of myself in the world, my purpose, and also insight into the light and the dark of my characteristics. It's really kind of brought this connection to a force that is much larger than myself. And that context helps me, get out of my head and get out of the day to
Mhm.
day and really lets me reflect on kind of where I want to be going and how I want to be evolving. It's been a tremendous gift, Manisha. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And thank you for being open to it because, sometimes people, are like, really? Astrology? And I'm like, well, let's just try it and see what we see. And you've been so open and curious and wonderful. And you've just really started to take it in. And one of the things I love that you have shared was just that it really offers you that larger context to life. And I think when we're moving through like the day to day and we're feeling, all these maybe emotional ups and downs and different things, and we're, in a relationship that's, feeling frustrating at the time, like to get a bigger picture of what's happening in our life, and maybe to even understand, we talk about certainly the natal chart, which offers information about you said kind of personality or traits or tendencies, but then we also look at what's called transits, and that's really looking at like what's happening in the current sky and how might that be impacting you, and what area of your life is this really highlighting or bringing up. And I think having all of that, for me certainly has been like life changing because it just helps me recognize and put things into context. And I always hear you say like, well, let's look at the big picture, because it can be so easy to get like sucked into the minutia and spend so much time there and feel like, well, I just spent an hour talking about this thing that I can't really change. But when we zoom out and get a bigger context, and then we talk about the thing that's like frustrating or difficult, I feel like we just come to a different outcome, like one that you can actually move forward with.
That's so true. And to be honest, Manisha, like I couldn't have arrived at this place to have this sort of larger context curiosity if it wasn't for sort of my growth and learning over this time together. I was just too in the weeds dealing with, my personal triggers, my emotions, and just responding to everything that I didn't quite know how to harness or get a grip on or make
Mhm.
traction on. And yeah, and to be perfectly honest, of course, in the beginning, the astrology piece being so foreign to me, I was a little bit skeptical, but I couldn't deny the truth of what
Mm.
of what sort of what was coming out of these discussions that we were having. So, it's just been this really unexpected and pleasant surprise.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I mean, I would encourage any of your listeners to be open to it. There's nothing to lose, and there is kind of like there's kind of a comforting feeling about it that you're not just operating on your own accord, that there are these larger forces at play and cycles that you can, bring into your awareness. And it's all related, I think, to personal growth. And
Hmm.
there's so much goodness in it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we had a chance to explore that and continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying just at the beginning of like really being stuck in the weeds. And I think that's so true for so many of us when we sort of embark on any sort of, personal growth, development, like therapeutic journey where that's why we're doing it, right? Because we're like, we feel stuck and we're like, what's the next thing? And I need some help. And so you shared a little bit about how the work has expanded and supported like your professional life. And because I think the initial reason you were seeking out support was around like your more personal relationship, and your romantic relationship. I'm just curious if you could share, and you don't have to get into details, but just like some of the ways that you're feeling different in the relationship from when we started to now.
Yeah, certainly this is so important. And this has been it's been such a preoccupation in my life for so long that now it's a part of my life. And I've come to accept so much and just really grow in so many ways. Okay, so if you consider how I've changed, it's really that in my relationship with my husband, I am now a far better advocate for myself. I just I just come to the conversation expecting mutual respect,
Hmm.
and feeling safe and grounded and confident and secure enough to really speak from my heart and expect that at least my thoughts and feelings will be respected. So I certainly, take up the space and I don't know if this is too extreme, but I almost feel like I didn't have the right to that before. And
Hmm.
I don't know really what's behind all of that, but I'm definitely, claiming my right to be an equal in a partnership. And that's been, with holding boundaries, that's definitely been a progressive area that I've had to work in. And then just with relation to my emotional side, my triggers have softened incredibly. Like I would just immediately be reactive and just kind of overwhelmed by this fight or flight response and not able to think clearly. My emotions would just overwhelm that thinking part of my mind. And now I can absorb things that may not sit well with me, but feel grounded enough to think clearly, and act with intention instead of, being swept away. And sort of one of the primary, I guess, intentions that I've been working on with you for a long time is to just feel aligned, like just to feel like what is going on inside of me is aligned with how I show up in the world. And slowly but surely, I feel like I've just been chipping away at this older version of myself and kind of adding those pieces to how I show up in the world today. And I'm much more emotionally strong. And that's just opened up so many new opportunities in terms of the quality of my relationships today.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I really hear that emotional strength in everything that you're sharing. And even as I've watched and witnessed your growth from certain conversations really taking up so much of your mental space and your energy and feeling depleted to now a couple years later, you're saying something and you're just like mentioning it as it's this casual thing, whereas before it would have been like the whole session, right? Or like multiple sessions. And I think that's just something to recognize that this work can certainly have shifts that are quote unquote quick in the sense of we're dropping from the mind into our body. So we're getting this information, in my opinion, and everything I've seen, a little bit maybe faster than if we were trying to think through it. But this work like that you've been dedicated to also takes time, and that's okay. Like that's okay for it to take time and for us to give our bodies and our minds like the time and space that they need to feel safe to really step into some of these changes. So I almost love the chipping away because that's how it works. But if you look at your life then and now, it's a completely different life.
It is so different, but it feels so good to feel good after feeling badly for so long.
Yeah, that's so well said.
It was so exhausting and just as you mentioned, it took up so much of my mental capacity.
Hmm.
It's just in so many ways it's a relief.
Hmm.
And I didn't have to be I didn't have to be living that way, feeling, all of those various stressors compounding, but I also didn't know what else I could do. And now I know.
Yeah, I think it opens up a lot of options, like when we know how to process our emotions. And it's just not something that we're taught, And so, which is a shame because I feel like this is the kind of stuff we should be learning since we're children, really.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, certainly.
so I have a couple more questions before we wrap up. But in your opinion, like who do you feel like this type of healing work is ideal for?
Everyone, period.
Everyone. Everyone, period.
Oh, everyone, period. But I guess so more specifically, I would say, and this is coming from my lens, so, someone who wants to sort of regain alignment in their patterns or their emotions or thinking or behaviors. I said this before, but it was so powerful to me. Like, in many ways, I feel as though I have taken back parts of myself that I had given away to others. I would say if you're someone that wants to feel more whole or more connected to yourself, someone that's perhaps struggling to manage adult responsibilities and stress,
Hmm.
or just discover more about yourself. I really believe that through this practice, I have developed a stronger spiritual relationship with myself. And as I mentioned, it really strengthens those bonds between mind, body, and heart. And it's just been so rewarding. And Manisha, I really feel like you understand the how to of what it takes to gain traction in a particular area or towards a certain outcome. It's almost like how a building engineer could look at a design and figure out the inner workings and construction to achieve that vision. Like you essentially really worked with me to re-engineer the parts of me that I knew that I needed to learn about and become aware of, those parts of me that were stealing my attention and focus. And been doing the work together for some time now, and I've just learned to be at peace with those things that felt badly before.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I love, and I want your guests to know, is that for every set of sessions that we work together, I love that we set intentions.
Hmm.
And so that by the end of our time together for that particular group of sessions, I'm able to see, real progress. I can see that I am able to make progress on every intention that I set out to work on. And that makes me so proud. And I really have you to thank for bringing me that greater awareness and accountability and really creating a space for me to grow and learn because a space like the time that we have together doesn't exist anywhere in my life.
Mm. Oh my gosh, that makes me so proud too, because I get to see all of the progress towards those intentions and sort of how you're really weaving them in and yeah, all of the things of how you've grown and shifted. So,
It's really it's really, it makes me really confident and that's priceless.
oh, beautiful. Oh my
It's
gosh, well,
amazing.
go ahead.
I just want to tell you that it's amazing to be fearless in confronting difficult challenges.
Yeah, that is very powerful. And yeah, fear can absolutely paralyze us in so many areas of our lives. And so, yeah, I just so appreciate you saying that because I don't think we realize sometimes how that holds us back across the board. So, yeah, to hear you say that just makes me beam, and I'm trying not to cry also. Yeah.
I think the other thing that's very empowering about that is we have all of what we need, all of the tools and all of the experience just in the way that we are in our bodies right now to thrive. And for all of your guests that may not have had, an experience of working with you, like I guess, and circling back to what I said, like everyone period, it's all within us to become the version of the person that we want to
Mm,
become. You don't have to go out and buy something or, all of it is already within us. We all have access to learn how to do this.
hmm. Yeah.
But like I mentioned, I don't have the space to learn and grow anywhere else in my life except for with our
Hmm.
time together.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think that just giving ourselves, to me, like even in the personal work I've done with other practitioners, like it's such a gift. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming or scary to make that move, but really every single time I've done it, it's just been like a massive shift. And yeah, as you were saying, like you're inside, like it feels like a total shift from this core place within you, which just has such a ripple effect on every single area of life. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. And is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything I didn't ask you?
Nothing, nothing specific except for a sincere thank you for being you.
Oh, thank you.
And I think, and the thing about it is that not everyone can land on the support that they need,
Mm,
to become that better version of
hmm.
themselves. I knew before we started working together, I knew that I had a deep desire for change, but it was all in my head. And all of those thoughts, they were outpacing how I was actually showing up in the world. But now I feel like there's a balance where I can integrate what's happening on the inside and just bring this evolved person to share with the people that I love the most and in my daily interactions and in my professional life. It's given me a lot of peace and confidence. And so I have you to thank for all of those gifts.
Mm. Oh my gosh, thank you. And you are doing the work, and yeah, super grateful. And that last piece is so beautiful because I think that that peace and confidence really comes from this place of congruence in the way that your insides match your outsides. And when we are working to contort or present a certain way or think about what might be expected or wanted, like that's where so much of the friction comes and so much of the
Yes.
depletion comes. And, everything you're saying, it just also makes me think of like, how can we move through our lives like with, yes, more alignment, but also just feeling this lightness because we're not carrying this heavy
Hmm.
burden of so
Oh,
much
yeah.
expectation. So beautiful. Well, thank you again for being here and for being willing to share parts of your journey. And I just so appreciate you. I hope that you enjoyed listening to that conversation as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I want to thank you so much for being here. I know it was a longer episode than usual, but it felt really important to provide this space for my client to share her own transformation and all of the amazing ripple effects from our time together. And if you are looking for this type of support in your life, I would love to explore that with you. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, and you can always check the show notes for the link to read more about my 4-month mentorship program. You'll see all the details there, as well as a link to book a consultation to discuss what working together would look like for you and how it could absolutely help you transform your relationship from the inside out. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Transform Your Relationship podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to help more people find us so they can transform their relationships too. As a thank you, every month, We'll pick one winner to receive a free 45-minute one-on-one somatic coaching session with me to explore and gain clarity around a relationship challenge. And if you know somebody who could benefit from listening to the show, then please do share and help me reach more highly sensitive women who want to experience richer, more connected relationships.